welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Tuesday, everyone. I hope your week is off to a great start. Well, I wanted to take a second look at the importance of the transits that are going to be taking place this next week. In particular, this may feel like a little bit of a part two to the new moon in Leo, but I really want to break down the significance of the Sun in Leo square Uranus in Taurus, definitely planting a seed for some very sudden sparks of, I guess, inspiration, freedom, and yeah, really kind of kicking off this new moon in Leo that's coming in. So I want to talk to you guys about that. I want to break it down and give you my hot takes on why I think this is such a potent energy and why it's bringing up opportunities for change. I also want to talk to you guys a little bit about some of my astro musings and where I'm seeing some of this energy kind of playing out collectively. If you guys like my content and you want to see more of it, make sure you click the bell button below so you're alerted as to when I have new videos out on the channel. We've got live donation readings on Friday nights, horoscopes, Sunday astro weather, so much content coming out on the channel, all because you guys support, you like, you comment, you share. Hopefully you're subscribing and considering donating to my channel. If you guys are not aware, I have memberships, so there's several different levels. If you guys want to support my work, I would really appreciate it. All right, so let's get into it. Obviously, I had to play on some of these themes going on with Leo and the lion energy, right? It's hard to not feel this energy of the sun being in this particular sign. So we're going to be talking about rousing the lion within today. Earlier this week, I came across a really cool quote and I saved it because I was like, wow, I have a feeling that that'll apply to this particular transit. I didn't use it for the new moon in Leo video because I'd already shot it, but it inspired me to want to talk about this aspect in particular. So Alexander the Great said, "I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion." Now this transit is very much baked into, like I said, the new moon in Leo, setting the stage for a rather dynamic new moon cycle. So as many of you guys may or may not know, we don't just have the new moon that takes place for a day and we do some of our kind of whimsical, new moon intention woo-woo stuff. That's planting a seed that is going to set the stage for the next 28 days. So I know things have been a little wild with the Venus retrograde. I know we're in Mercury's shadow, but this is definitely a transit that I would not overlook, especially because it's going to be reactivating a Sun-Uranus conjunction we saw earlier this year. It's also going to be reactivated as we see Venus swing back into these degrees later in the fall. So before I even get into some of these aspects, because you're going to be feeling it over the next couple days, I want to take you guys back a little bit and show you first when this Sun-Uranus conjunction first started, which is leading to the opening square. Now the square, like I said, it's going to be pretty much baked into the new moon, but the exact square of the Sun in Leo coming into a square with Uranus and Taurus will be taking place on the 15th. So as you guys are watching this video, it's already kind of setting up all day long. It would behoove you to take a look at what's going on today and where you're feeling a little bit of this electrical energy, this rebellious energy. Now the square is when you see a hard 90-degree angle between planets, okay? So the sun is going to hit 23 degrees. It's going to come into a square with Uranus and Taurus also at 23 degrees. So we've got this new degree that's also coming in, right? It's very Uranian, it's sudden, it's shocking, it's surprising. And like I said, this is really dating back to when we first saw the Sun and Uranus come into conjunction. So you can look at this particular cycle very similarly to, let's say a new moon. We have a new moon, the intention is being set, we see the sun and the moon come together. Then when we get to the first quarter moon, we see the sun and the moon square. And this is where we first start kind of feeling like challenges and we're building towards our intentions and we're working through things and there's obstacles. And then we have 7 days later, the full moon, which represents the polarity, everything kind of coming to this boiling point or some kind of an awareness that is, brought into the collective. And we're seeing polarity kind of play out in the world. Then finally you get to the last 3/4 square, and so things are kind of dismantling, they're breaking down, and then 7 days later we have that new moon. So the opening square, right, the first square since the conjunction was actually seated, does represent that Mars opening challenge. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to make a change? How are you going to either fight back or defend something? That's generally how that energy plays out. And, you know, squares in general are a little combative, but in the fixed signs, we see a lot of resistance to change. We see the grinding of the gears, the unwillingness to back down, the very strong egos, especially with the sun being in its ruling planet, in its ruling sign. So this is going to be, I think, a lunar cycle for the books, the more that I keep looking at how all of these sequences are kind of lining up. So let me show you where this was first seated. I want to take you back to the beginning of May of this year. And we're going to take a look right around May the 9th. Okay, so this is when the Sun and Uranus came into conjunction. And so that conjunction happens every year. I'm not saying that there's necessarily anything super fancy about this conjunction. However, when the sun, which shines a light on something, comes into conjunction with an outer planet in the world collectively, we start to kind of see these themes kind of popping up. Now, this particular degree is really significant and it's very important because if you look back at the summer of 2022, towards the end of July, early August, we saw the conjunction of the North Node, Uranus, Mars in Taurus, which was essentially, in my mind, a very important conjunction because it was kind of signaling what may potentially be coming in the future Uranus. Now, the North Node was about the collective, goals, where we were moving forward, what we were hoping to achieve. In some ways, it was also kind of signaling what was going to be huge trends. Taurus is about money, banking, resources, pleasure. Obviously, the last few years, since, seeing Saturn come out of Aquarius and out of the squares that we had with, Uranus and Taurus, lots of fluctuation with the banking systems. We saw like the FTX collapse. We've seen all kinds of things happen in the last couple of years where we saw that the system is kind of like beginning to crumble. Now, Taurus also rules the planet. It deals with the earth. It deals with natural disasters. Uranus and Taurus, we've definitely seen a number of those the last couple of years, not just financial disasters. But we're learning more also about energy, and we're learning about the effects that energy has on the planet, the effect that energy has on the body, right, the physical body, and just lots of changes in resources. Throughout some of the stressful squares we've seen in recent years to Uranus and Taurus, there has been shortages and delays with supplies and shipping and receiving issues. So we've definitely seen some of our resources get rocked a little bit throughout this transit. So when we look at 2023, this was a new conjunction, an annual conjunction between the Sun and Uranus, once again at that same 18 degrees. 18 degrees has associations with the service industry, with animals, with productivity, with health, with food. It's a very Virgo type of degree, and it does have some more challenging aspects to it. So of course, my eyes lit up a little bit when I was like, oh, I forgot that was the degree where we had that conjunction. So now here we are, several months later, coming into the opening square, where the Sun, being in its ruling sign, is essentially coming into a challenging angle with Uranus. And this is definitely going to be kicking up some stuff, guys. To help you better understand how to make astrology work for you, number one, part of the reason why I do this is because I love teaching astrology. I love creating videos and showing people how they can use astrology to their benefit and better understand the direction in where their life is meant to be going, but also it's about collective energies. I try to disrupt the narrative that astrology is meant to be the sole purpose of future predictions and anything involving just reading your sun sign. I think that that's a little self-absorbed personally. And I feel like astrology is meant to be looked at in a collective sense because everybody has 12 houses, everybody has 12 signs represented. We have all the planets in various signs. So we're so much more than just looking at our sun sign horoscope. when we begin to look at the forecasts and some of the configurations in the sky, we start to realize that there is like a divine plan and everything is kind of woven together, and how some of these celestial aspects are more or less influencing the masses and waking us up. And there's going to be a lot of waking up going on all month long. I can't reiterate that enough. So to better help you guys navigate this, I'd like to give you a couple dates. So it would be a good idea if you consider writing this down. Those of you guys who already track the moon, maybe you have like an astrology calendar, maybe you use an app. You guys get your extra credit for this. You probably already know. You're like, yeah, I'm watching the squares. But I want to give you the lunar transits that are really going to rock us over this next month. So you're ready, you know that it's coming, and you're prepared. And I'm going to show them to you so you can see what I'm talking about. So obviously we have this moment where the Sun-Uranus squares. So we're taking the energy of the sun, which can be ego and power, and it can be about creativity, it can be about love, taking chances, squaring Uranus. And I'm already kind of feeling the square. It's definitely come up a couple times for me today. It's been a lot of like, well, do I risk this? Do I do that? You know, do I make this video? Do I short the stock market? Definitely conversations that are very Sun-Uranus have been taking place. But when this particular square starts, obviously today is the very first day that you want to be aware of some of the rumbling and the feeling of needing change, right? So once we get to the first lunar square, so this is going to be the first transiting lunar square. This is going to be right here when the moon comes into Sagittarius. Okay, so let me bring this back a couple hours. So this is going to be August 24th. Okay, so make a note of August 24th. Now, obviously it's not in the fixed signs, okay? So we're seeing the square take place at 23 degrees of the fixed signs. Now the first square is in the mutable signs because the sun is now in Virgo, all right? And mutable squares, I will say they do better with squares because mutable energies are about change and transformation, right? That's why they rule the weather and things in regards to being flexible and making shifts. Now this is going to be an interesting day because not only is this the first opening square, but we see the opening square with the mutable signs at 0 degrees, which means we're kind of like getting our bearings and learning how to let some things go. These particular signs, the mutable signs, they rule the periods where we're seeing changes of the season, right? Right before we're coming into cardinal energies and things are initiated. So I liken the mutable signs to, you know, giving way to, okay, this isn't working. Let's try something new. Let's kind of wrap this up. Let's get ready for the new. So this opening square is at 0 degrees. All right. So on the 24th, this is when you're going to start to feel the real rumblings of change. Obviously, the sun and the moon, when they square each other, it feels a little discombobulated. Now, thankfully, it's happening, at least here in the United States, pretty early in the morning. So I think a lot of you guys aren't really going to start feeling it until maybe you're getting to work, you know, a little bit later in the morning. And you're going to get tagged here also with the moon coming into a square with Saturn. So that's going to represent some challenges in terms of clarity, right? Emotional connection, authority. And the moon, when it's in Sagittarius, it wants the truth. It says, let's get to the truth of the matter, ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is currently sitting in Taurus. It's going to be going retrograde soon. And Jupiter will be eventually receiving some trines between Mercury and Uranus. So when I see like this T-square, it makes me feel like the people or those who are willing to see the silver lining in situations, who are willing to, you know, question, you know, why are we here? What are we doing? What is the purpose? Or be going after the truth, or really reflecting maybe on some of your beliefs, are going to be the ones who are going to kind of move through this a little bit better. Now then 7 days later, we're going to be coming then into the full moon. Okay, so this is the polar point from this, particular square that we're seeing. And this is going to be a full moon, and this is going to be in the sign of Pisces. at 7 degrees, conjunct Saturn. Now I'm working on that video. I'm gonna put it out for you guys on Thursday. I'll let you have your new moon in Leo first. And the reason why, I guess I should say, I'm tying this to the lunar transits is because not just the Sun-Uranus square, but because the new moon is baked in with that Sun-Uranus square, right? So the moon is going to be a new moon in Leo, and then the moon is going to move to Sagittarius in square, and then the moon's going to move to Pisces in square, okay? So where the Sun and Moon square Uranus is very Uranian, the Moon in a square to the Sun represents the need to kind of reacclimate, reorganize something. And then the Moon in conjunction to Saturn represents a limitation, a dissolving, a letting go, right? Something just kind of like fading away. And then finally, and I guess I should say conjunct Saturn means that this is going to be almost like the repercussions for some of the chaotic things that are going to be taking place around the new moon that's going on in Leo. It makes me feel like this is when, we're seeing narratives change. And I think we're going to see a lot of that from the Mercury retrograde as well. And people walking things back, Moon conjunct Saturn retrograde, walking things back in regards to, well, who was responsible for something, or who was in charge, or who was supposed to be leading or looking over things, especially because, once again, whenever we're looking at Pisces, we look at Jupiter and we look at Neptune. And as the moon comes out of that full moon phase, it's going to start opposing Mercury, conjuncting Neptune. So there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. It's like, this happened, no, that happened. It's, you did this, you dropped the ball here. And there's going to be a lot of confusion, I think, with the narratives out in the world. We'll get to that. And then finally, when we get to September the 6th, this will be the 3/4 square. So this is the dismantling phase. This is, right as we're coming into, we're getting ready for another new moon. And this is generally when we start to see things kind of break down from the full moon on, things break down. But then when we get to the 3/4 moon, this is a day where you're like, okay, we're winding something down. Now, another kind of interesting day. The moon's going to move into Gemini, where we're focusing on communication, information, sharing, right? And the moon is going to be coming out of a square with Saturn. So we're going to feel that kind of questioning, how we can communicate, how we can connect, how we can share, feeling a little unsure maybe. Then the moon is going to come into a square with the Sun and Mercury, right? Conjunction in Virgo. So this is already coming off of the Cazimi point in the Mercury retrograde phase, where information is being relayed or something is being uncovered, we're finding something out. And the moon is in disharmony with the Sun and Mercury, which is basically like potentially maybe trying to conceal something, or trying to spin a narrative, or trying to manipulate with the squares to Neptune, how something is being seen. Now, obviously out there in the world, whether it's media or the news or, something you're seeing on social media or on Twitter, whatever, there is going to be lots of misinformation out there, okay? So I'm just telling you guys that so much of this next month is intentionally, I think, going to be meant to be confusing and a little distorted. So that way potential truths aren't getting out. And if they are, then there's, trying to find ways to spin it or potentially distract. One thing that I would say about this particular square is that there is this need to go deeper, right? The Sun and Mercury Cazimi, that conjunction that had just taken place just prior to the square, is like, what did I uncover? What did I find when I examined the details, when I looked at the label, when I read the fine print, when I went back and I looked at my notes, when I reviewed something that was originally, kind of posted, what's been changed, tweaked, what have you. And the Sun and Mercury will also still slightly be in a trine to Jupiter, which, by the way, is now retrograde at this point, which means that we're tapping and reviewing and taking a look at our beliefs. We're taking a look at growth. We're taking a look at numbers, statistics. Maybe we're looking at physical facts. So where there's some confusion here, there's opportunity, which if you guys saw my Mercury in Virgo video, check that out. My Mercury retrograde video, I talk about that as well. That we can kind of move through some of the confusion or some of the distortion. And then finally, we'll come into a new moon, and that's going to be in Virgo, and that'll be on September 14th. Now, even though technically we're phasing out a lot of the kind of crazy things that would have happened, the whole previous month of end of August into September, because this new moon will then mark another 28 days, right? So we work with new moons, not just those couple day periods where we're setting intentions, or maybe we're wanting to see what kind of happens during the full moon. You really need to give it the whole 28 days to see what shakes out. I mean, it does take 21 days to make or break a habit. So 28 is just perfect, I guess. And then we can also look down the road at eventually the full moon that will take place in the same sign 6 months later, and really see how that's matured. I'm going to show you guys some interesting stuff about that. But this new moon in Virgo is going to be with its ruler retrograde, and it's going to be building into an opposition with Neptune. So it still, to me, feels very shady, a little swampy. But I wanted you guys to have these particular dates. So August 24th, August 30th, September 6th. These are the days that you guys really want to pay attention, because this is when you're going to feel the squeeze of this sun, moon conjunction square, square Uranus, right? And you'll be able to take a breath, breathe, reflect, ask yourself, how am I feeling? How am I checked in with my body? Am I resisting change? Is my ego getting in the way, right? What does my heart say? What do I need creatively? How am I breaking free in some way? Now, something else I wanted to note, and I'll give you guys a lot of dates, how I kind of get like Charlie from Always Sunny. But another thing just to kind of keep in the back of your mind is that we will see Venus return to this degree and square. So there is still yet one more fun and fabulous Venus in Leo square Uranus in Taurus. That'll be in the post shadow. And that's going to be around September 29th and 30th, right? So there's going to still be some of that energy, of that flavor of the 23 degrees. That's like breaking free, separating, speeding up, looking into the future, right? Now I want to read you guys the Sabian symbol for 24 degrees of Taurus. Those of you guys who don't have the Sabian symbols, there's several different versions of this. This is the one that I use. And if you guys want to see what books I'm using and referencing, check out my Amazon book list below. I always have some goodies in there for you guys. So we're going to be reading 20, let's see, is it exact? Is it exact? That is the question. So is it 23 or is it 24? Yeah, it's going to be exact at 23. So we can read the symbol for 23, although I will say 23 and 24 are both very fitting here. Kind of really splitting hairs, but yeah, it'll be exactly 23. Okay. All right, so we're going to read 23 of Taurus, which is interesting. You guys have heard me read this. I want to read you guys 24 too, because I feel like it's even more bang on, because generally we round up, but it's exact. A jewelry shop, all that glitters. The symbol speaks to practical and material values, the man's desire to own and possess those things to affirm his validate his personal concept of who he is. The image of a jewelry shop full of precious gems, minerals emphasizes luxury, wealth, and beauty. Jewelry is used to commemorate special events such as engagements, coronation, graduations, and weddings. Thus, it alludes to the achievement, accomplishment, and special status. This symbol represents wealth as a lower sign of a higher mastery of values and a unique talent for creating beauty through imaginative enhancements of the ordinary. Watch for greed, materialism, or bad taste. The accent is on possessions. You may be tempted to overspend with your resources. A change in status is indicated. All right, so guard against excess, losing something of value by taking more than what you need, going overboard in one direction. Don't bite off more than you can chew, okay? And so, taking risks, right? That's kind of like a common theme with Leo. That's why it rules casinos and gambling and love affairs and having children and self-employment. It's like none of those things has a guaranteed, end result, right? You never know how those things are going to pan out. But I think that the squares between the 5th and the 2nd house, I have those personally. It's taught me sometimes big risk can be a big reward, right? Sometimes there can be a sense of overdoing it for the sake of having more, having excess, having the best, having the most fun. Definitely Taurus and Leo squares can be about having fun and overly indulging for sure. But I think that when I look at these squares, especially in the midst of the Venus retrograde, I do feel like it could be this realization that we may have been too overly optimistic. We may have been too materialistic, too greedy, right? Too fixated on having something. And that Venus retrograde represents like the tide is turning. So obviously a lot of these squares may represent for many of us, where are we reevaluating, what we're investing in or what we love or what we're spending time doing or our hobbies. Now in that 24 degrees, which is the one that I wanted to read to you guys, but I'm sticking to the rules. I'm going to read it anyway, because you are going to see that the sun shortly after that is going to come into this particular, square, right? So I was reading for you guys Taurus. So let me read to you 24 degrees of Leo. Okay. So 24 degrees of Leo, an untidy, unkempt man, judging by appearance. The symbol speaks to the inner reality and total immersion of some exalted task or goal. The image of an untidy or unkept man is another of the reversed negative symbols and alludes to an indifference of physical comfort, outer appearance, and opinions of others, who often accompanies an obsession with a mission. The suggestion here is that whatever the individual has brought to center for his person from the outer world will be refined, developed, and poured back into the benefit of those who will accept it. The earliest description of this image is a figure of a yogi of transcendent powers, thereby alluding to the spiritual quality of this particular degree. At its highest, the symbol indicates unflustered finesse in handling all practical matters of wisdom born of experience. Watch for self-obsession and irresponsible self-neglect. The accent is on indifference of criticism. Outer appearances are ignored and the focus turns inward. Your greatest advantage lies in doing what has to be done without being concerned about what other people think. So much of what I love about Leo is that it does kind of represent this need to kind of like sometimes get on stage and just like do or say what it is that you need to do. Granted, fire element can definitely, bring quite an audience. It can burn things down. It can definitely ruffle some feathers with the squares to Uranus. But I'm looking forward to once Venus really starts kind of doing her thing and she comes back to these degrees. It's going to be happening here. It's almost like that's when we really start to break free, the end of September, this particular square. We're going to see Uranus come to, 23 degrees and change. And this is what really piqued my interest because I have not started reading the later degrees of Taurus yet. So I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but let me read you guys that one. So this is the Sabian symbol for what will be 23 degrees of Taurus and change, so 24. So this is going to kick in just a couple days here. A mounted Indian with scalp locks. The keyword is command. The theme is the conqueror. The symbol speaks to accomplishment, pride, and the ability to gain superior position of an authority over others. The image of a mounted Indian with scalp locks is an aggressive symbol, and it suggests a primitive need to conquer and rule. The horse, which alluded but is not specifically mentioned, represents power, the senses, the lower or animal instincts of man. The scalp locks symbolize thought, mind, imagination, intelligence. The Indian is depicted in the position of control over himself and of others. Interestingly, this was not designated by Mark Jones as one of the reversed symbols. From this, it can be implied that this is not an ominous symbol, but rather an indication of earned authority and achievement. In modern times, this could represent a corporate headhunter. At its highest, the symbol represents self-discipline, mastership, but negative would be tyranny, ruthlessness, off with their heads approach to life, an obsession with controlling the thoughts and minds of others. The accent is on conquest and self-mastery. There's a chance that things could get aggressive and heads might roll. Your greatest advantage lies in staying calm and exercising self-discipline. Guard against losing your temper, being too controlling, and avoiding power struggles. Stepping stones would be authority, control, power, dominion, leadership, command, mastery, skill, headhunting. As soon as this degree hits within the Sabian terms, which is basically going to be like the 16th, 17th, it's going to be a really big topic, tyranny. You know, I don't remember exactly when I did that video. You guys can go back and look at my video. I did the astrology of tyranny, and maybe seemed a little early. Really kind of influenced me because of like a book that my dad sent me that was a book on tyranny and like how to be aware of it and how to see it and like how to know when to like stand up and say, no, that's not my preference, or that's not my belief system, or that's not what I want to do. And now it kind of seems like that's coming in handy personally, you know, just kind of given some of the events and things that are kind of going on in the world right now. I think with the sun being in its ruling sign, it's going to be bringing up themes revolving around being bold, being powerful, being prideful. But the sun can also be about men. It can be about leaders. It can be about children. It can be about creatives. And with Uranus and Taurus, obviously we've seen flux financially and with resources and banks, but also stability or instability for consumers, for resources that we need. And so, you know, something has basically been seeded this spring that now at 23 degrees is challenging. So we're going to see sudden shifts, sudden uprisings, new ideas, but more importantly, I think it's going to bring enlightenment and uprising to the masses. So when we kind of factor in, and we also look at this from the aspect of the moon being involved, where the sun is more, you know, men, leaders, fathers, authority figures, the moon can represent women and emotions, but more importantly, collective emotions, right? The moon can represent like the public. So we've got this connection between the sun and the moon where we've got the conscious and the unconscious coming together. And that new moon in Leo represents that time where our actions, our creativity, our inner authority kind of steps forward, and it comes into conjunction with the moon, inspiring people basically to, you know, rouse like the lion within. But it's not going to happen quietly. I think that this is going to be for many people with this conjunction, you know, tapping into intuition and emotions. And a lot of people feeling flux, and a lot of people feeling change, and feeling collective waves of people getting like a little fed up. Now, to give you guys some examples of the last couple times that we saw some of these squares, we can go back to, you know, February through summer of 2021. When we had these particular squares in 2021, this was the kind of jumping, or the starting point from when we started to see the AMC meme stock take off. Okay, so we were seeing, yeah, it was February. So the sun was coming into a square with Uranus. It was a conjunction to Jupiter. End of January, beginning of February, but we saw the sun, and this is obviously a huge stellium in Aquarius. So this just shows you what power can happen with groups, with the masses, right? Obviously, a lot of us were a little kind of bummed because we're realizing, wait, what? We're going into another year and we're still, you know, experiencing limitations socially, right? Gotta love Saturn and Aquarius. But this sun square Uranus, and definitely, you know, the sun, it does not perform as well in Aquarius, as we know. So the square between the sun and Uranus was a little bit different. This was also a closing square. But we saw the meme stock take off, you know, primarily because a lot of young investors were rallying together and trying to find ways to invest in a stock that wasn't really doing much. And, you know, at one point saw a 3,000% gain, trying to beat Wall Street investors at their own tricks, at their own game, right? And so this is the coming together, ganging up, staging a fight. Obviously, Mars and Uranus were also in a square. So I think that this kind of represents some of the banks and some of those platforms not really being ready or anticipating that particular mounting pressure that was going to come through with all of these kind of young rebellious investors, right? Pretty significant. So that's one way we can look at how in recent history the Sun-Uranus square has played out. Let's take it to 2022. And in January of 2022, specifically the 22nd, we see the sun coming into a square with Uranus, okay, towards the end of the month. And the Freedom Convoy in Canada was taking place. So this is when the sun in Aquarius was square Uranus and Taurus again a year later. In Ottawa, the massive convoy of demonstrators that rolled out in the mid of winter heralded a new era in Canadian politics, blaring horns with the rumble of hundreds of idling engines. It was a week-long freedom convoy that protests went on, and we saw kindred demonstrations that appeared to provide, a lot of coming together, challenging international border crossings amid forced government's end to COVID-19. We saw resistance to public health restrictions and health mandates. And so I saw this as a turning point where I think those groups stood up, where the truckers saw issues with tyranny and advanced and pushed back on government control, in particular health mandates, not just because of the effect it was going to have on them, but because of the effect it was going to have on you, how that was potentially going to affect the masses, and how that movement really kind of inspired a whole chain reaction of a lot of other people kind of realizing whoa, there's something going on here. We have to kind of come together. We have to wake up, right? So this was actually in 2022, sorry. I'm a year behind. There we go. Granted, there's other things going on astrologically. There we go. And that was a new moon. So it looks like this was taking place at the end of January. So right towards the end of the new moon, when that square was taking place, we saw the convoy. And then the sun was coming into conjunction with Saturn. And so we were seeing a lot of pushback, especially from the Canadian Prime Minister, who we know, Justin Trudeau, that essentially kind of smeared a lot of these individuals. We did see some people that were being kept from being able to donate to the convoy, and some of them being marked as terrorists. All right, so let's take it to July and August of 2022. We saw a really similar square to what we're experiencing right now. This was just a year ago. So the end of July coming into August, and this is also a really active one because this is when the sun was coming into a square with the recent North Node Mars-Uranus conjunction. So it looks like this one was happening around August 10th. And a demonstration that was going on. We had Dutch farmers protesting. And in the Netherlands, in the fields revolving around the countrysides, we saw all kinds of farmers coming out and making trips into the cities to go and protest government plans to cut nitrogen emissions by half in 2030, reducing the number of livestock by a third. The government was warning that there could be compulsory buyouts and that the farmers lit bays of hail on fire. They blocked roads with manure. They blockaded government buildings with tractors. It was definitely not something I saw on American news stations. It was not on the news out here, at least not the mainstream legacy media, but definitely saw a lot of it on independent media. For me, the astrology was just it was real. You're seeing demonstrations, right, Leo? It's this is the show we're putting on against or challenging, especially as the sun was squaring the nodes, opposing the moon. There was a full moon that came, a day or two later, challenging government. And so this represented this buildup of this grand fixed square, where some of these demonstrations were necessary in order to put pressure on this North Node Mars-Uranus conjunction. For me, I saw this as where farmers saw the threat of big business and commercial farming moving in, trying to produce, quick, low-quality food, GMOs, and highly controlling crops and products, all in the name of saving the planet. For me, I guess it's just the further that I go down some of the climate, theories. I mean, obviously we want to make sure that we're taking care of our planet. We want to be able to protect the earth. We want to find solutions for some of the things that are going on in the world. But it's taking a little bit of like a darker turn right now. I think with some of like the technocratic things happening with environmental concerns and taxes and limitations and carbon related things. I'm personally not buying into a lot of it, and I know that I might get some slack for that, but that's just, that's just my perspective. I know that you guys don't always agree with things that I look into, but I make a point to not really talk about stuff on the channel unless it's something that I'm really actively going and researching. I think, the other thing that concerns me is that it's being spun in a way right now that, trains and planes and automobiles combined still is nothing in comparison to this growing global environmental issue. Now they're starting to call it global boiling. You see a lot of people who are sitting on councils internationally, yelling and screaming, talking about what's going on with the planet. As of this week, we're starting to see more pressure that's building, especially in Ireland, where farmers are being forced to cull cattle herds up to 200,000 cattle over the next 3 years, or they will be receiving, fines for environmental concerns. Farming is also being, kind of brought down. We're starting to see farming, at least independent farming, being brought down in parts of Canada as well as Australia. And so I'm kind of like noticing a trend here. I'm not saying that we're seeing fires, we're seeing natural disasters. Obviously, I'm going to get into that. We're going to talk about that today. I think a lot of that is just Uranus and Taurus in general. But you guys have to remember that the North Node does deal with things that can be artificial, things that are going to give us more of something. So when that Mars North Node Uranus conjunction happened, since then we've been seeing fires in California. We see the fires that are taking place in Hawaii. We've seen the fires all over Canada. This has been seeded, and so that's why I'm bringing it up now, letting you guys know that now the squares are coming back, and you're going to see some similar stuff. All right, so what am I noticing? I'm noticing a trend where it seems that situations where there's chaos and scarcity is coming up more frequently. Right? We're seeing this where it's almost pushing some people into corners where they'll accept support in any way, shape, or form because they feel like they have no other resources, they have no other options. Encouragement for people to eat bugs, to have energy blackouts, to sign away their freedoms, all in the name of safety, sacrifice, and for the greater good. I mean, that to me, is that Pluto in Aquarius? Like, is what Pluto in Aquarius is going to bring us? Because we've noticed this uptick that's been happening since we saw that ingress earlier this spring. It's almost as if it's being designed to rock the whole system so much that it implodes, creating a crisis and introducing, or in some cases, selling the solution back to us. It has me concerned for future climate lockdowns, higher emission taxes, and who knows what else, right? That's just me personally. We have seen that there has been an incentive for the auto, food, and agriculture, as well as the energy industries to, commit to what is eventually going to be a net zero commitment. I think what they claim to kind of help the planet, but I think it's going to be a total totalitarian takeover of society, all designed to destroy liberal democracy as we know it. If you don't believe me, do your own research. Although these days, when you look at stuff on Google, and you're going to see that things are intentionally being flushed, kind of being buried. So you're going to have to do your due diligence to go and find some of this information. But there is something that's widely out there. You guys can go and take a look at the UN's 2030 agenda. I would familiarize yourself with some of those goals, where there's major incentives to completely get rid of independent-owned private vehicles or homes, properties in some situations, to encourage people to be moving into smart city areas, especially places that have been affected by natural disaster. I would also be going and looking into, Klaus Schwab and some of the books that he has been publishing on COVID-19, and where he sees this as an opportunity to, move into a new era. What you guys don't understand is that without talking about this, we're going to continue to drift further and further away from a free society. losing the opportunity to live closer to nature and in a natural way, the way humans were designed and born to live. You're seeing your freedoms fall away. And the next month and the things that take place, it's really important for you guys to wake the lion within. Say something. Do something. Coming together, especially with some of these other Sun-Uranus aspects we've seen, has given us opportunities to be able to actually bring awareness. Even though we're seeing limitations with the internet, we're seeing all kinds of censorship. We're also at a time where division is extremely high. But I personally don't think this is about global warming. I don't think it's about sustainable living, sustainable development. You know, anytime I hear, oh, this is not sustainable, I cringe because I know that everything that comes thereafter that is likely going to be about creating a life that's not free. I think it's about enslaving humanity. They want to wipe out the small and medium-sized producers. They want to centralize food. They want to put it in the hands of mega corporations, which are in bed with mega governments. And what these squares are going to bring is an opportunity, I think, for a massive awakening. And it's not just going to be with the transits taking place today. It's going to take place all month long. And so I think that this Mars square, or this energy of the square like Mars, is going to push people to act. So I'd encourage you guys to really think about where you've seen individuals rising up and challenging these narratives, political, financial, environmental, right? Because something is not, at least for me, it's not adding up. I don't know, what do you think? Now, here's some ways that I'm seeing this kind of taking place right now. And this is as a result of me going and doing some digging the last couple days on the internet. Just this past week, we saw protesters out in the streets in Berlin protesting against NATO, the German government policies, and Agenda 2030, right? So you will see protests happen with these squares. You do see groups of people coming together. And I think that it can be opportunities also for some of these like Leo-related groups to come together. So children, creators, actors, designers, famous people, right? Challenging some of this Jupiter-Uranus stuff. So that's already kind of showing. Obviously, I've gotten a lot of emails. I've gotten a lot of messages about the fires in Hawaii. I want to say that in this day and age, it's really hard to talk about stuff with total accuracy if you're so far away. And I think that's part of the appeal, as much as I hate to say that, of why in particular this may be ideal for some of the people who may or may not be involved. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not surprised. It's funny, I keep finding myself tripping and falling into going down the rabbit hole looking at charts. And I did it with the Titanic video, and I started doing this with Hawaii, and it just go figure. Hawaii also has a Libra rising Aries moon, just like me. When I did the Titanic video, you know, they had the moon in Aries, just like me. So it's weird because the North Node getting really close to my moon tells me that, like, the more that I'm listening to my intuition and doing work and like giving my astrological or my intuitive forecasts on what's going on in the world, I kind of feel like led in a weird way. And like, I know a lot of people are talking about this, but I just want to say that we can't really know factually because we're not there. The same way we don't really know what's going on in Ukraine because we're not there. But when we look at the chart for Hawaii, let me show this to you. Really caught my eye what's going on right now. And if you guys aren't following me on Twitter, please do. Because I'm posting about some of this stuff on Twitter. I'm being a little bit more outspoken about some of this stuff right now. Hawaii has a Libra rising, Sun in Leo, Moon in Aries. And the Sun in Leo is the late degrees. Okay, so this is right where the Venus retrograde started, which is very important considering Venus rules this chart. Very similar to Ukraine. Ukraine also has the late degree Leo Sun, and so we're seeing a change in a situation involving both of these charts in particular, and they're making the news, that's for sure. Obviously, Venus retrograde over the Sun can be about those who are in charge, those who are in control, leaders, local leadership, governments, what have you, right? And also, it can talk about the relationship that this chart can have with leaders. So just reflecting on just like this last week, you know, hearing that Biden is on vacation, you know, requesting billions of more dollars to be sent to Ukraine. But when asked if he has a comment about the Hawaii fires, he said, no comment. So even the Venus retrograde on the sun, for me, is a lot of like our certain, individuals or leaders turning their back on this. But the reason why this interests me, not only because, obviously this is in the news right now, the Venus retrograde seems like it's at a very pivotal point. It is squaring transit Uranus in the 8th house, so it can represent the money, especially involving like tech and other things that could potentially be pouring into this situation. Obviously, the squares to Pluto in the 4th house can be about some kind of devastation or major transformation on the home front. But I'm looking also at the Mercury transit. So Mercury is going to go retrograde. And when the Mercury cazimi happens, it's going to go over Hawaii's Venus. There's a lot of Venus stuff going on here. Right here. Around September 6th. And I'm anticipating something about this particular cazimi, and then Venus will come into a square with Uranus. It's going to be about groups of people coming together, working together, being of service. This could also be because the 11th house is government and the squares to the 8th house is about change, transformation of resources. There's a lot of stuff out there right now. Honestly, I've seen a lot of conflicting information. That's why I said what I said. I've seen some people who are talking at length about being like, look at all the power lines. There's tons of power lines in the area where the fires were in this like kind of like historic area. And that, locals showing videos being like, this has been like this forever. The power lines are essentially just covered up by trees, and they're saying it was like a tinderbox waiting to happen. Obviously, you hear a lot of other people talking about, dues and whether or not they think it was like an energy weapon because of the way that the fire looked. I'm not going to speculate because I don't know about this stuff, but I do know that I got some interesting information from somebody who sent me some I'm not going to say insider stuff, but somebody who was just like, yeah, this is like coming directly from a whistleblower. Anyway. So Jeff Bezos wants to donate to Lahaina, okay? So $100 million he wants to donate. Does that come with strings? That's what I want to know. We're seeing that large resorts, big box stores, and famous homes were oddly spared during the fires, which is kind of unusual. Maui locals are banding together and declining assistance in buying up land. So it's interesting. You go on Twitter, as of at least today, so I'm filming this on the 14th. You go on Twitter and you see two things that are trending, three things: Hawaii fires, and Oprah. And I was like, why is Oprah trending? So going and looking at that, I mean, apparently like Oprah went into some of like the like local shelters and was like handing out pillows and came in with film crews and apparently was like told to leave. I don't know. It makes me wonder, like, is there an incentive? I started asking myself, is there an incentive? It was like right when the fires came out, I looked at the chart and I went, interesting. Venus is retrograde over the sun. It's square Uranus and Venus rules the 8th house. I was like, who is wanting to invest in Hawaii? Because whoever's going to invest in Hawaii is going to run the whole show. Well, okay, I go down the rabbit hole, learning more about, what incentives have been brought up over the last year, just as early as January, about trying to push this agenda in Hawaii to make it all green and environmentally friendly and self-sufficient. And a lot of the area where the fire was, it was all protected. This was all like a historical area. And so it doesn't really make sense that they were trying to kind of push this. And for decades, there's been, a lot of locals there that have been unwilling to sell, maintaining their businesses and keeping their homes and their spaces, and they're not wanting to sell to big-time developers. So apparently, and this has come up in a lot of resources that I've seen, a lot of sources I've seen, there's a lot of issues with FEMA and the Red Cross right now, which is no surprise when we look at what's happened with other FEMA things in the past. The U.S. government are not sending or allowing the release of sovereign people of Hawaii shipments of goods because the FEMA and the Red Cross basically want to make sure that everything is safe and secure. So I could see two sides of that. On one hand, send non-perishable goods, right? Or find ways to be able to donate so people can get stuff locally there or have stuff brought there. But on the other hand, it's like we have seen situations, especially with previous like hurricanes and other natural disasters, where we find tons of stuff that FEMA is not releasing. So apparently on the ground, people are receiving shipments and pallets of things that FEMA is not allowing them to have. But locals are taking matters into their own hands, coming together in groups, leaving the island by boat and going to neighboring areas to bring resources back for those in need. I received an email from somebody who sent this to me, and they said, hey, you know, are you going to talk about this? And I was like, I don't really know, out of respect to the families and stuff. But in the back of my mind, I was just like, there's something that doesn't sit right with me about this. And so somebody sent me this, which apparently is coming from somebody who's a whistleblower from Oahu. Whistleblower, they're protected, all right? So I'm not saying that this is true or false. It's just this is what was sent. This is the message word for word. I just got out of a meeting where I was informed by someone in the mayor's office about developments that are being kept from the public. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't want to make trouble, but here's what I've heard. The amount of fatalities is expected to be more than 500, but less than 1,000. Many of the fatalities will be children who were at home because they canceled school, parents were working, and they were not there to evacuate the children. The children had no idea they needed to leave. By the time they noticed their homes and apartments were on fire, it was too late. The government is worried about how we will react when we learn that the fire department left the fire earlier in the day and claimed it was 100% contained, knowing the winds were expected to be 70 miles per hour in the afternoon. This is against all fire control protocols. The fire department should not have left the original fire unattended. They're all scared the public calls for accountability will be more than they can control, and protests and riots will occur. They plan to lock down Lahaina for several months. It'll take months to clean up the hazardous environmental contamination. They won't have enough housing for all the displaced. There were 2,000 folks unaccounted for this morning. They found 700, but they're still searching for another 1,300 that are missing. They're very worried the community is going to freak out when they find out that not a single fire truck responded to this. The emergency sirens were not activated, hurricane sirens, and the loss of life could have been kept down by better emergency management, which utterly failed. I'm not trying to make waves or stir up problems, but I was so angry and sad when I found out how many children were dead and knew that I had to post this and let everyone know what I knew. It's time for officials to stand up and tell the truth and face the music. Our government is full of incompetent people. Well, kind of strange. You know, I remember, and I went and had to Google it, I remember some years ago, because I had friends that lived in Hawaii at the time, in 2018, that an alert was accidentally issued via emergency alert system and wireless emergency alert system over the TV, radio, cell phones in the U.S. state of Hawaii, instructing citizens to seek out shelter due to an incoming ballistic missile, but it was an error. Okay, so we're sitting, 5 years later? You know, Hawaii's known for having there's a lot of military activity there. They have amazing, from what I understand, alert system. They have to, because they have to know when things are coming in, whether it's, something that could be an act of war, or it could potentially be something that could, be from weather. And it got me thinking, looking at this chart, especially considering Saturn is moving through the 5th house, which deals with children. We see this retrograde through the sun into Leo. So it's about a reevaluation of what's going on with top officials and who's in charge, and the squares to Uranus, and whether, is it because there was some kind of failure with those who were supposed to be, ensuring that everybody was kind of taken care of? Or is it because there was some kind of energetic, electric, laser type situation that came about? I mean, I can't speculate. This is just what's been kind of going through my mind. I think about also looking at the solar return. I don't think I have it here. But the solar return chart, there we go, for 2023. 18 degrees, Aries rising, Chiron on the ascendant, so going through some kind of healing related crisis, ruled by Mars. Mars is in the 6th house in opposition to Neptune. So it's a lot of well, where's the assistance, right? Mars exactly in conjunct Quiconk. So Hawaii is coming up on their solar return on the 20th, basically. And then you see the sun, which is usually in the 11th, 10th house, return to the 5th, trine the North Node, and Venus is retrograde. 5th house, children, square Uranus. Yeah, that Mars in conjunct the North Node, once again, I remember saying in my astro weather last week, I was like, you guys are going to see things where people are going to go, who dropped the ball? Like, I thought we had your support. Like, I thought you were helping us. You were in charge. We've got leaders of the United States who are contacting Congress asking for more money to send to a proxy war. You've got Hawaii that's in a state of shambles, and also potentially what could be some really devastating news that may or may not get out if it is true. You can go look on the news. They're sending, the FBI is in Hawaii. They're bringing in freezers for, bodies that they're finding. But you have to understand it was like a fire. So it's like, are they actually going to be able to have a total death count? Now you're going to see that there's going to be an eclipse that's going to be right on Hawaii's moon, according to the solar return chart. Okay, so you got to look at, when you look at solar return charts, you got to look at how that corresponds with the natal and progressions and things like that. And so I saw that 21 degrees and I went, oh, 7th house moon, which can represent partnerships, collaborations, right? But this can also represent the emotional state, can represent homes, women. Moon conjunct the South Node, ruled by Venus. Venus retrograde in the 5th. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to realize, like, we thought we could trust these elected, officials or what have you, and like, what happened? I would imagine what we're going to see both when Venus goes direct and then comes across that 28-degree sun and that eclipse, that's going to bring up more in regards to what happened in Hawaii. So right around October 6th, and then when the solar eclipse happens on the moon, and obviously solar eclipses, new moons on steroids, fresh starts, but it's dealing with the South Node. It's very close to the South Node, ruled by Venus. Venus is in opposition to their Saturn. So I wonder if the truth, if that is what happened, starts coming out then, right? So, what else? There was something else I wanted to show you guys. Oh, I think I looked at the progressions too. Hawaii's progressions. So Hawaii's got a progressed Sag rising. The sun this year just moved into Scorpio. The moon just moved into Leo. And look, sun square moon. So it's in that dismantling, breakdown phase. Pluto also is going to come into a square with the sun over the next year or two. And that's also going to represent some kind of change in regards to, potentially like money and politics and government there. I've heard so many people kind of speculate. And the truth is like, we don't know. I don't know if we're ever going to really know what happened. But something about this makes me wonder if there was a connection here to the fact that they want to see if they can start testing some of this stuff. It's not in the mainland. We're not going to see it here in the United States. You have a lot of international travel that goes in and out of Hawaii. A lot of people that want to come and visit that are going to potentially see that, and it could become normalized if they are having smart cities and they all have, digital everything, and, there is potentially no actual cash there, and there's like no cars, and it could potentially be trialed there, and they could work out all of the bugs before it comes to other places, which I would assume would go to places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, some of these areas on the West Coast, New York City maybe, that are going to be more receptive of potentially some of these things in the name of having safety, security, and, better energy. Ironically, some of the cities that are also dealing with some of the harshest waves of crime right now, some of the biggest issues with looting and homelessness and you name it, right? But has dramatically increased in recent years. Now, for right now, like I said, you guys can go back to the transits that I gave you, those squares. so that way you know when that change is going to be coming in throughout this next week. My advice for you guys is watch what happens today, today and tomorrow, when collectively we start to realize that the change actually has to be initiated with us. That there is going to be something that's going to kind of rise up that goes, oh, you know, I had this breakthrough, I had this epiphany, something's been illuminated, I'm finally moving through this thing, and I'm giving myself the permission to, you know, act. And for some of us, it's, you know, it's creative disruptions. We're going to see that. Because, you know, Leo is about creativity and self-expression, and Uranus brings sudden unexpected changes. So some of us might have to be innovative in how we're approaching some of this change. For many of us, it's going to be about challenging authority, because Leo is about leadership, and, you know, Taurus is traditional. So when we see these squares, it's going to encourage us to question and rebel against established norms, right, or hierarchies that are existing. There's going to be a much stronger need for freedom and for independence. I think especially breaking free from constraints that limit our self-expression or our, you know, our freedoms, our individuality. Yes, you are going to see that there's going to be some financial instability and some financial change. But for many of us, that's the prison, that's the shackles that keep us from speaking out, that keep us from saying something. I mean, we joke about being in cancel culture right now, but I mean, that's a real thing. There's a lot of people that are like, they cancel that person, I'm not going to say anything. You know, I don't want to risk my neck, and I feel like I do it every day on YouTube. I feel like I'm constantly walking that line, which has, you know, inspired me to want to go to Twitter and want to, you know, start doing other things. Not that I'm leaving YouTube, but I definitely feel like it's inspired me to be like, what other avenues are out there that are going to give me the security and the support, and equally where I can build an audience where there can be an exchange. You know, I put a lot of work into researching stuff and putting together videos for you guys. And I know some of this stuff doesn't feel very astrological, but it is, because when you look at some of the squares that are going on in the skies this summer, it's really more or less preparing everybody for what potentially is to come. Especially when we start to look at the next square. You guys ready for this? There is some terrifying astrology, in my opinion, down the road. We're going to see the next square that's going to happen, and this will be to Uranus, I want to reiterate. And this is going to be at 21 degrees. And when this happens, it's like you can't make this shit up. When this happens, we're going to see the sun hit 21 in conjunction to Mars, in conjunction to the sun. So sun, Mars, moon. I like Sun, Mars, and Scorpio. It likes to fight. It's scrappy. I got that. But it's right here at 21 in opposition to Uranus. Woof. At least you've got Mars working for you, but a new moon in Scorpio conjunct Mars is like fight or flight. The opposition to Uranus is like very unexpected, sudden changes. And, you know, remember guys, now the North Node is in Scorpio, is in Aries, so it's ruled by Mars. So Mars moving through this particular sign, 8 houses away, is saying like, oh, we got to go through a change. And humans don't like to change unless there's crisis, unless it's affecting you, your family, your bank account, your job. You guys don't want to wait until this happens. Now, that's going to be the next phase. So this will be the opening phase. And we're still playing off of eclipses. We had eclipses earlier this year that were in Taurus, in Scorpio. We had a Scorpio eclipse. We're going to have one more Taurus eclipse that's going to be at the end of October. And then finally, we're going to see the closing square when the sun comes into a square with Uranus. Right here with a new moon. New moon opposition. New moon square. New moon square. Why is it squaring? Why is it we see the squares happen every single new moon? It's the universe preparing everybody. Saying, pay attention to Uranus, pay attention to Uranus, pay attention to Uranus. Why? Because when Jupiter and Uranus conjunct next year at 21 degrees, everybody's going to find out that there is a sudden growth and development, right, of global and legal 21 sudden changes, Uranus. And what is this ruled by? Venus. Venus is going to be in Aries conjunct Chiron, right after a string of conjunctions to Saturn. Everybody is going to realize it does not matter where you live. It does not matter what your beliefs are. It does not matter what your political affiliations are. The powers at bay are going to be making some pretty blanket decisions about limitations. And I don't know if this is travel. I don't know if this is money. It could be either of those things. It could be also, finding out that we're all kind of globally moving into this like cashless direction. And that's going to be interesting because then when the Sun and Uranus come into conjunction next year, 22 degrees, 23 degrees, so it'll be at the same degree that is squaring, it becomes real. Oh, I mean, we're seeing this right now with like SAG-AFTRA, like they're fighting this, they're pushing back right now. They're doing this basically because they have not been able to come into agreements in regards to, directors, writers, actors, all potentially, I think, getting ready to be replaced, if not already, by AI. I saw some stuff today where I think it was Netflix is posting ads wanting to hire people, for six-figure salaries who can come in and do AI, which may sound like a lot, but if that potentially replaces big budget actors, directors, writers, what if the kids that all rallied together and said, screw Wall Street, we're going to beat them at their own game. If the farmers that came together and said, we're standing up and we're saying something because if we don't, then we're not going to have the right to be able to work with the earth and feed people healthy food. What if the truckers who realized that there was also going to be control and limitation of money, right, as well as travel, what if all of these people are causing a ruckus because they want to wake other people up? What if that's what's going on? Because I think that's what's going on. I would like to think that I'm one of those people because I don't feel like everybody is quite aware of some of the impacts that are going to be coming later in the year. And so, we've seen this throughout history. Certain groups are marginalized or, they're excluded from society or they're discriminated against, treated badly. And it's all okay for some groups until they come for you. Right? So they're coming for the fringe people. They've been coming for the fringe. But what's going to happen when they come for the common person, the everyday person, Taurus? Next year, that's what's going to be happening. So it's up to you guys to start looking around this month and going, what's not right here? What's not sitting right here? What can I choose? And like, ask any Leo. They're going to tell you, make a scene. Right? I love you guys. Make a scene. That's the best thing that you guys can do right now. And I'm not encouraging you to do anything that is angry or violent or illegal. I want to reiterate that. But I do feel like this combination is going to be bringing out for a lot of you guys a desire for freedom that can lead to a strong likelihood of breaking free from constraints that limit your self-expression, that's limiting you from having freedom, especially financially. We are going to be seeing some of these fluctuations going on. The monetary shifts are going to be happening. They're going to continue. I would imagine, especially as the moon is coming into the balsamic phase today, I'm like sitting around waiting, going like, what's going to happen to the stock market? Because it's definitely, especially with the squares, you're going to see that's when things are going to get uncomfortable. I'm looking at today and I'm looking at when the moon goes through Scorpio and starts to come into the square. I would imagine somewhere around there could be some breakdown. Continue to strive for uniqueness. A lot of you guys are going to feel compelled to stand out and to differentiate yourself from others, and I think that's a good thing. Know that there's going to be conflict in the skies, especially between tradition and innovation. And so while I've said a lot of this is about, freedom financially versus the banks and the big guys, or freedom when it comes to food and resources versus how people want to monopolize and make money off of it. Seeing all of this massive food stuff that's going on is obviously we're going to have less quality, we're going to have less control, Most of the grocery stores, at least here in the United States, I think are owned by like maybe 2 or 3 major companies. So as we've seen inflation and everything hit, understandably, things are going to be more expensive, but we're paying more for food than I think we ever have. And because there's little competition, they can kind of hold those up. But if you go beyond just the cost of it, it's what's in it. I've been so concerned about some of the stuff with food that I have made the decision to completely cut all of my protein and all of my meat and go directly to like a private like rancher's company. I'm not going to buy food at the grocery store anymore, like at least meat. And the other stuff that I'm buying, it's organic, or I'm trying to find ways to source stuff locally because that's my contribution. And obviously I know everybody can't do that, but there's got to be some reason why there is an incentive to get everybody like on an electrical grid, to get everybody that's potentially going to be in, EVs, to get everybody who's going to be, eating, lab grown food and meat. There's this like grouping mentality. And so if you notice throughout the next couple of days or in the next month or so, that there's something that rubs you the wrong way and there's resistance, likely it's coming up for a reason. And a lot of this is also going to be about technology and innovation, and where technology can be good because it can advance us, but it can also be a double-edged sword because we might see that with technology growing and developing further, it does offer convenience, but at what cost? The cost of jobs, of potentially becoming like I laugh, like a cyborg. I mean, I know that sounds weird, or, a transhuman individual. Is it going to come at the cost of, thousands, if not millions of jobs? I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to see just how much effect AI is going to have if it continues to go unchecked, right? In a million different ways. And obviously when we see Sun square Uranus, there's going to be lots of ego stuff that's going to come up. So that can bring up relationship dynamics. Venus is retrograde. So this can be linked to relationships and partnerships, and there can be unexpected changes that we're going through on a personal level, which is urging us to find the balance between individuality and partnership. But I guess the blanket lesson all month long from this particular square that's starting is about embracing change. And while we see these 2 planets square off, it's encouraging us to step out of our comfort zone and step into a new awareness, right? The key here is being aware. Because while the Sun square Uranus creates the static, you're going to see the Moon conjunct Saturn on the 30th. That's going to be the restriction. It's like, oh, we got to wrangle this in. We got to pull this in. It's just getting a little out of hand. We got to slow this down in some way. Yeah, and eventually, when this new moon in Leo becomes a full moon, it's going to happen when the Sun is conjunct Pluto. And by then, going into February of 2024, Pluto's back in Aquarius. It's going to spend a lot of time in Aquarius next year. Most of the month and most of the year, I think like 9 months. That's when things really start to kind of change, especially Jupiter square Pluto. My goodness. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, it's election year. Yeah, well, it's not really so much about that. The jury's still out for me whether or not there's going to be an election, or if there's going to be some other, potential catastrophe and a reasoning for why, they want mail-in ballots, or, some other thing they're going to try to come up with. We'll see. Let me know. How are you guys feeling with this square? I had to take another look at it and obviously talk about some of the stuff that I'm seeing now. I have found it harder and harder, and I've said this in previous videos, to kind of keep my mouth shut, because while I know you guys love listening to your horoscope and you like learning about you and all the things that are going to affect you, know that so much about this is about how it's affecting us collectively. You might have a totally different rising sign or sun sign than another person, but you're still fighting this pressure cooker of needing to kind of break free from something one way or another. And that's what's so cool about some of these aspects, is that we are seeing it. We're also seeing the Sun that's getting ready to come into a trine with the North Node. We're going to see that Venus will eventually, again, trine the North Node. So I'm hoping that this is just kind of kicking the door in the next couple of days and having a lot of people be like, nope, I gotta do this thing. This is what I have to do in order to kind of like make a scene and potentially bring attention to something. I'd love to hear from you guys. How are you, contributing? What are your plans? How are you orchestrating or creating change in your own life? Especially those of you guys who are aware of some of the transits that are coming with this new moon. This is the month to definitely do something different, right? Get out of your comfort zone. Leave me your comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you guys like my style of reading, you want to book a personalized reading with me, you can find me at beyondtheveiltarot.com. My website is right down there. I've also got all kinds of stuff on my page now. If you guys check out my website, we've got astrology calendars. I've got new calendars that I'm offering also. I'm going to be offering new personalized 12-month forecast calendars that you can like download directly into your iCal. So if that's something that interests you, that's something I have. I teach astrology as well as tarot. So check out my website while you're there. Sign up for the newsletter so you're alerted as to when I have new stuff coming out on the channel. I will be back on Thursday. We're going to be talking all about this incoming full moon that's going to be in Pisces, conjunct Saturn. And like I said, that's the lasso moment. So get it all out of your system the next 2 weeks while you can. And I will see all of you guys back here on Thursday. Until next time, take care.